Well, welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Josh Cybulski, co-hosting this show with me in the flesh, Corey Leckie. What's happening, partner?
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you, buddy. So, what's happening, man? You're here. You're in the flesh, in my basement,
It's crazy.
in my bar.
Took the big tour from Sarnia to Ottawa.
Long journey.
700 kilometers around there.
You're a real digital nomad.
What do you want to talk about?
I didn't really have a topic. So something I've been really thinking about, and I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to approach this in what we're trying to do with the second story videos, the shorts I mean, is did I waste my 20s? They seem like forever ago, because I'm almost in my 40s now, but I was looking back on my 30s recently, and I really feel like I could have done better the first half of my 30s, and then I probably could not have done better the second half of my 30s.
Okay.
And then it made me think about my 20s, and did I waste my 20s or did I learn a lot of valuable lessons? So this is something that I've really been conflicted by. I mean, ultimately where my life turned out was pretty amazing. I have a bar. I mean, who doesn't want a bar? Right? I've made it. The irony is,
like how the first thing you went to is the bar.
I have a bar.
I have a wife
that was
children.
Yeah. Cut that. Cut that. I have a wife and children.
Yes.
I have a bar.
There.
I have a bar in my home. Jokes aside, I have been thinking about this a lot. Like, were my 20s a waste, or did I learn a lot of things that are valuable? And now I'm in a position, and you're in this position too, where we teach a lot of kids that are not kids, they're adults, but we're old, so they're kids to us. But we teach people in their early 20s, and they have a lot of questions about life and like what went right, what went wrong. And I do feel like I have a lot of wisdom to impart on them about what went wrong, not necessarily what went right.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's what's kind of made me think about this, because a lot of these people I'm teaching are in their 20 to 24. And
mine too, yeah, college students.
Yeah. And they're just like, what did you do right in your 20s? I'm like, well.
Have you ever had someone ask you that?
Well, they've asked me, like, what advice would you give someone in my position? I get asked that a lot. What advice would you give? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do have a lot, because things went so miserably wrong in my early and mid 20s. I'm like, well, don't do this. And I should have done that. And I try not to be negative about it. I try to approach it from I learned about these things.
Yeah.
So maybe it's something we can get into. Was it a waste, or was it a valuable learning experience?
When you think about it, you can't go back and change it either way.
No, absolutely not.
Right. So there's no point in dwelling on it, but we can definitely break into the things that maybe you would do differently if you did have a do-over, something that you could pass on to someone else.
Oh yeah. I think that's what it's about. Just like, it's not really healthy to look back. It's kind of what depression is you're always caught up on like what went wrong in your past. Mm-hmm. And you could certainly get depressed about things that you did in your 20s. We'll get into some of the specifics, but yeah, I'm at a good point now in my life where I can look back on and be like, wow, I learned this, I learned this, I learned that. Mm-hmm. But I still have those moments where I'm like, God damn, if that didn't happen, like, what would have happened? But
yeah, if I had started this earlier, where would I be right now?
Yeah, I don't have any regrets on a personal level, because everything led me to my wife and having my kids and stuff like that, and it eventually led me to come home. I shouldn't say any regrets, but I have very few. Mm-hmm. But on a professional level, ooh, buddy.
Ooh, buddy.
Yeah, more than a few.
Yeah, I've got some of those too.
Yeah,
on a professional level for sure.
It's kind of interesting that we met in our 20s.
Was I in my 20s still?
Yeah, still barely. You were barely in your 20s when we met in 2005.
25, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were 25 in 05.
Yeah.
And we're going into 2025. That's how old Corey is.
There's the math. So why is it interesting that we met in our 20s?
Well, it's at a time in our life when we'd both experienced a certain amount of failure, or maybe not failure, but we had both experienced impasses, we'll say, in our life that kind of sent us to the same place ultimately.
Yeah.
You were a few 5 years older than me. Are you 5 years older than me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, damn, eh? Wow. Math, again, not good. Not great. But we both went to school and then figured out that what we went to school for was not for us. And then we're like, oh, well, we'll just go to school again.
Yeah.
And we did the school take two. And probably professionally the best 2 years of our lives.
Well, I met you on school number 3.
Actually, technically mine was too. Mine was
Yeah.
also 3. Wow. Okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Third shot, third kick at the can. We had a piece of paper before that though.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we were without the
Two
credentials.
2 pieces of paper that were
Toilet
useless,
paper. Yeah,
really.
essentially toilet paper.
yeah.
Yeah, same here. Mine was only one because I left one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I left one of them too, but somehow I squeaked out a diploma out of it,
weird.
like a general arts thing.
Oh, yeah, that's what I had too, general arts.
Yeah.
We're in the same place even though we're different ages. We would come to this place in our 20s and go through this incredible journey that was film school,
Yeah.
learn so much, and then have so much optimism as we're leaving film school, like, shit, this is going to be awesome, and then just get our teeth rammed down our throat by the real world for a long time.
Yeah, and we went opposite directions. Like you went Vancouver, I went Toronto,
Yeah.
and both were failures, really.
Yeah, failures.
Really.
Yeah, they
Like,
were.
When you think about that time, though, I mean, that was 2008, right?
07 when we got out, 08 when we, I mean,
08 was when the failure happened.
08 and 09, yeah.
And that was like right at, like, second we got out of school, recession.
Yeah, almost literally.
Yeah.
was
So,
tough.
so thought, like, you know, working on a film set, they were definitely cutting back big time.
Yeah.
So the idea of getting work in that, it just wasn't necessarily there. At the time, I was looking on Craigslist for jobs.
In the porn
You know
industry.
what Craigslist is now, but at the time it was actually a fairly legit
Was
job
it?
search
Even
tool.
then?
Yeah.
You know what? I think I got my job in Vancouver off Craigslist, actually.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the porn? No, I'm just kidding. No. There was certainly a lot of that, though, in
yeah.
Craigslist, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, didn't you meet your wife on Craigslist?
No.
No. Yes, we came out just at probably one of the worst times that you could come out of school.
Yeah. But that being said, I mean, a lot of people that came out of our school did make it. So what did they do that we didn't, right? Like what got them into the industry that didn't get us into the industry?
Oh man, that's where you get into it. Well, I think a lot of my lack of success in my 20s was self-limiting beliefs for sure.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was all that talented, which is probably true, at least in film. I came out and I'm like, what am I going to do on a film set? So I had I had opportunities to meet people and like go on set, but it was my self-limiting beliefs. And I also didn't say yes to a lot of stuff, which is it's been a theme of this show, where I was just like, that seems scary. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. When I left Toronto and then moved back home, it was kind of one of those like, man, I really failed. And then I didn't know what I was going to do. So it's like I could start a business. I tried that. I did one shoot and then basically never did another shoot because they didn't call me back. It was like one person didn't call me back and I was like,
That's the end of my career.
I suck.
Yeah.
Right? Gave up. But the problem then was similar to what you're saying. I had a few different opportunities where they were like, can you do this type of work? Can you do that type of work within video and film? And I was like, no, that's not really what I specialized in school. So I can't do it. But it wasn't until like quite a few years later after that, where I think it was around 2012, where I just had this like switch in that. And I just started saying yes to even things that I had no idea how to do. Like someone contact me about animation or something like that, and I would say, yeah, I can do that.
Sure.
Because what I realized is I had contacts. I had people that did know how to do that. And all you have to do in business, here's a little tip or a secret, is you just need to know who can do it and then make sure that you put a profit on top. Right?
And go get them to do it.
Get them to do it. You can hire it out. Like, think about any place does that all the time, right? Like a factory, they're going to hire for specific positions.
Yeah.
Right. So why, I guess as an entrepreneur, you don't need to be the one that does everything.
Sure.
You just need to be able to organize the people that do everything.
Facilitate.
That took me a while to learn. But when I did, it all of a sudden opened a bunch of doors. And then as time went on, it was like, oh, I've actually now learned how to do this thing that I said before I couldn't do. And then suddenly you don't have to hire for that. Now you can do it. You've learned that skill. So saying yes is very important. It's very important to like just go and try things.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yes, sir.
That is what businesses do. Like I've worked at a lot of factory jobs through my 20s. Almost fell. Too many protein shakes. I was saying like factories that I've worked for. I've worked at so many places where they take on a new vendor or whatever, like a new task in the job. No one's ever done it. They have to organize it. It's a disaster at first, but they figure it out, or they bring in specialists that do it or consultants or whatever that sort of figure the whole thing out. I've worked on a lot of places like that, and I should have learned that before I went to Vancouver, because I did work at a place where we built data recorders and they'd never built them before. And they were like literally teaching people on the fly. It was people who had never done it were teaching people how to do it. It was a disaster, but they made it work eventually. And I should have learned from that, but I was an idiot kid and I didn't. So it's one of those things where, I mean, there's a lot more. There's more than self-limiting belief and like a lack of confidence in saying no. It's also work ethic.
Yep.
Like I did not have a work ethic in my 20s that I do now. Like I would work hard at work, but I didn't really understand the concept of like working outside of work. I was like, I put my 8 hours in, my work day's done.
Yeah, clock out and you're done.
Yeah, I never understood the idea of like working on your other things that you actually want to do. It was always like, go home and apply to some jobs and try to apply to a job in the industry I wanted to work in. And that's just not the way the world worked then or now.
Yeah. Like for me, when I came back home, I started working in customer service. I worked in different jobs within customer service in the corporate world. And that was actually the ability to have that pay the bills, but then hustle. So you do your 9 to 5, but then do the 5 to 9 where you're building that thing outside. Mm-hmm. That's really how I created my video business. Was I was after hours doing the video work and then taking that money and reinvesting it in the business.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's how you built your business.
Yeah. And I mean, it's years of sacrifice to do that. But in the end, you end up with something that you can call wholly your own. So,
yeah. So I guess this is out of our 20s, but I guess we should talk about the whole thing on that point. The whole concept of 1,000 days. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're trying to do this new thing, or at least I am. I think you're into it too. I think you are. But I basically set this expectation that for the next 1,000 days, and I started this months ago, but I'm going to essentially work my ass off for every minute that I'm not with my family. Basically every minute that would have been my free time, I am going to work at the thing that I'm trying to do for 1,000 days.
Yeah. Until
either the 1,000 days are up or I get to the point where I want to go, and then I'm going to keep pushing. But
yeah, because if you do 1,000 days and you're still not there, then it's probably not worth doing at that point.
Maybe. Or maybe you hit pause for a few months, recuperate like your wounds, and then start a new 1,000 days.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's a new thing. Or maybe in the middle there's, we always talk about the off ramps, like the highway. But the off ramps, maybe there's an off ramp in the next 1,000 days that I catch. But I've said to myself, and my wife and I have talked about this, that I am willing to work my ass off for the next 1,000 days to try to get the things I want. And that's like I've basically given up movies. I don't watch movies. I don't really watch TV shows. I still watch hockey because I work in hockey, so I kind of have to. But it's like one of those things where like now it's in the background and I'm working while I watch it. It's not like I don't sit down for 3 hours and just watch a hockey game.
Right.
But that 1,000 days thing I should have did in my 20s, but I never knew that idea.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the bigger things that I wish, like if I could go back and do something, that's what I would do, is grind a lot more in my 20s, because I didn't.
Well, they don't teach you that in school.
No, God,
right?
no.
Like you do school, they teach you a skill, and then they say
Talking about post-secondary, they teach you a skill.
post-secondary, yeah.
Some of it.
Yeah.
Some post-secondary teaches you a skill.
Yeah. Usually college, but
Yes.
here's a skill set, go out in the world, use it. Mm-hmm. But they don't teach you about the way to grind or to like put in the time, be patient. The work that you put in is eventually going to pay off.
Yeah.
You don't really get taught how long it takes. It's almost like when they send you out in the world, it's instant. Like you're going to go out in the world and you've got that job and that's good and you're good for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But it's rarely the case.
Here we go. 27% of college grads have a job related to their major. So basically 1 in 4. That's old data, but I'm sure it's probably still similar.
Yeah, I think it's actually lower now.
Is it really? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, 1 in 4 people end up in a job that is related to their post-secondary, you said?
How many of them want to leave it? How many of them go to school, get the thing, and then want to leave that?
And then realize it wasn't what it's meant to be.
We won't mention any names here, but you and I both know doctors, people who went to school to be doctors, who go to school for the 10 years, they start working as a doctor, and they go, yeah, no, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they end up in something else.
And substantially in debt.
Yeah, the guy I know was 125K in debt.
Right.
And he's like, oh, I don't want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's messed up. Like, imagine you go to school that long, dedicate that much of your life, that much of your, financial, God, like the debt you go into, and then you come out and you're like, this sucks.
Yeah.
Man.
It's not for me. I just did it because I was told to. Or
Yeah. we talked about that on the Bill of Joints episode of the podcast.
Yeah.
Of this podcast. Talked
Yeah.
about that, how so many people are just kind of pushed into some. I was.
Also.
Well, I've talked about this on the show, but I worked at a TV station in high school. I was there with one of the producers one day, and he's like, are you going away to school? Are you going to stick around? And I was like, no, like I'm going to go to school for broadcasting. He's like, I can teach you everything here for free. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, but I got to go get the paper. He's like, no. He's like, I don't have it. I work here.
Yeah.
And I remember going home and being kind of excited, being like, I don't think I need to go to college. And my parents were actually like hummed and hawed about it, but they're like, maybe you should, talk to the guidance counselor about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I did, and they're like, you're an idiot if you don't go to school. Not in those words, but like I did have a teacher tell me I'd be an idiot not to go to school.
Really?
He's still a teacher. He's still giving kids advice. And he's been a teacher his whole life, which is absolutely nothing wrong with that, but terrible advice to tell somebody, hey, quit doing the thing to go to school to learn to do the thing so you can come back and end up doing the same thing.
But that's what they're paid to do.
They are. But then the following summer, I had an opportunity to actually work in broadcasting, get paid for it. And I worked in it, and I was like, yeah, no, this is not for me.
Yeah.
And then I was still pushed to go back to school, even though I was like, I don't think I should. And then I lasted like a month in, and I was like, I'm done. I can't. Like, I won't survive this because I hate it. Now, people might think that's weird because now we do a podcast, which is essentially broadcasting. And I've spent like 14 years broadcasting hockey, but I went to school for journalism broadcasting, not sports broadcasting. So I realized that after my first year, I'm like, this is not the path I want to be in. I hate journalism. I hate journalism. I'm kidding. I'm being a little tongue in cheek. There's some that are sweet people. The ones I knew actually were very nice, but I knew I didn't want to do it, and I just kind of let people talk me into it, And I spent so much of my 20s doing that, where I would just let other people sort of guide me. And now that I'm older, I'm like, I mean, I'm probably too far the other way, where I'm like, I don't take advice from anyone who's not in the spot I want to be in.
Yeah.
So right now in my life, there's like, as far as like professional advice, there's probably 2 people I take advice from. Yeah, and you're one of them.
Oh, jeez, that's...
No, I'm kidding, you're not.
Yeah, that'd be stupid.
I would never take advice from you. As if you thought that. No, there's people I don't know who I listen to their advice, like the Dan Martells and stuff like that.
That's one good thing about social media.
I love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like people I actually know, there's probably 2 that I take advice from professionally. I give people advice, which is weird because I'm probably not in a spot where people should be taking, maybe young people should take my advice, but
I think when you can look at it with humility, right, and realize that, yes, you made some mistakes, and then impart that onto people, like, be honest about it. Here's some mistakes I made. Here's what I think you should do to not make those same mistakes. I think that's good advice.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people out there that go through no hardships in life and kind of get through life pretty easy, make it to where they want to make it, and I don't know if those are the best people to give advice.
Yeah, people who've never kind of had their back against the wall.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Because
I know some people like that, but they
wouldn't know how to get through a hardship.
No. A lot of those people, they get to where they want to go.
Right.
But they don't get to where I want to go, or maybe where you want to go.
Right.
Like I know people like that too, that, maybe didn't have to go through a rigorous process to get a job, or a rigorous process to go to school or get licensed or educated or work up the ladder to whatever position they're in. It was just kind of easy and sort of given to them. But they may be at a point where they don't make a ton of money. Like they make it tough enough for like them to be comfortable, but they don't. I mean, it's not all about money, but like for me, I want like the ability to go do the things that I want to do, and I want to eventually get to a point where I wake up and dictate the own terms of my day, or my own terms of my day, I should say. I'm not there yet, but I don't know that I'm all that far either.
Going back to school though for a minute, like all through school, public school and up, it's a preparation for your next schooling, right?
Yeah.
So through public school, they're getting you ready for high school. High school, they're getting you ready for post-secondary. I don't know why in those stages they're not preparing you for the possibility that maybe that's not the best route.
Well, it's because school is one size fits all.
Right.
Right. Do you know the origins of the school?
Yes, but maybe the crowd doesn't.
Oh, should we talk about that?
Sure. Let's talk about it.
Well, as a
Prussian,
as a man who hails from West Prussia, no, my family did. So they were Prussians, which is basically like it's the borders moved around, Poland, Ukraine, Russia. They all kind of bounced around. So I don't know exactly where they're from, but anyways, it was that area of Prussia. So the school, for the most part, North American school, originated in Prussia, and the whole idea of school was to basically create soldiers or people who could work in the factories and basically cogs in the machine. So that was the idea of school. You train people to be obedient and to follow the rules and follow order and be able to memorize and regurgitate. And that was the whole purpose of school in Prussia. And then Horace Mann, who was from, I want to say Massachusetts, went over there and learned about this model of school and brought it back to the States in the 1800s. And that has essentially become the model that North America, like Canada and the US, use for public school.
Yeah, because they're trying to churn out workers, right? Churn out factory workers during the Industrial Revolution, all that.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially it. And it's changed for today, but not a ton. Like, it's been obviously modernized somewhat. But, people will always ask the question, like, school was never for me. It just wasn't for me. You hear tons of people say that, and it wasn't for me at all.
Yeah, same.
Like public school or whatever. But it was like the people who could read and say the answers and like not really question the answers, they did great. Me, I'd have a question about everything. So I did poorly. I also didn't crack a book. So I hear that helps. I also could barely read.
Yeah.
So that didn't work in grade school. But I did better in college for sure. Like I actually was very successful at college. Because it became more of like a practical hands-on kind of thing. But
Yeah.
yeah. What about you? Your 20s? What were some of the things you look back on and you go, shit, like that was a lesson learned?
Yeah, my 20s were interesting because, like, I did go to college right out of high school, picked the wrong thing. It was kind of related to film, but not really. It was more along the lines of journalism, which I also hate. And yeah, I didn't do well. I flunked out. I just wasn't ready to go to school. And then basically, you know, I moved out of my house. I lived on my own for a few years, worked in factories, like just a little bit aimless in my 20s. And then decided to go to university, which most people would say, hey, well, that's you getting your life together. And maybe in some ways it did send me on a path, but university really, the things it did for me was maybe gave me some work ethic. Other than that, though, paper means nothing. It was a Bachelor of Arts in history,
Yeah.
right? So
Well, you got the job at that history factory after. That was good.
yeah,
Yeah.
I initially thought about teaching, but then I guess there was always that pull to like do the film thing. So then finally went to film school, and I think that's why I went so late, right? I was 25 because I finished out my university and then went. But really, like, should have probably just went that route in the first place. I don't know if any of it's a waste because it all leads to the next thing, right?
It's strange that like you originally thought you could be a teacher, so I'm going to go to school, be a teacher. Now you are a teacher.
Yeah.
I originally went to school because I thought I would work in broadcasting or journalism. And now I work in journalism. It's sports journalism. And I work, you know, we do the podcast, broadcasting.
Yeah.
And I've worked on radio for 14 years or whatever. It came full circle. I think we've talked about this before, but their life has so many full circle moments where you kind of, I don't want to say you end up back at the place, but you sort of leave this place and you think you're never going back, and then eventually life kind of takes you in this loop, and then you're like, oh shit, we're here again.
Yeah.
We're back broadcasting. Yeah.
Well, and is that by circumstance, or is that because all along you were like still in your brain going, how do I get there? How do I get there? How do I get there?
I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the overjustification effect. Maybe it's like, oh, I was getting paid for this, but I kind of lost my love for it. Now I come back. Oh, actually, that's my true love, that profession.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what it is. I always had this calling to talk because I was good at talking. Relatively. Well, I'm better than some people. I'm better than a few people. I'll tell you, I talk.
Are you looking at me?
I'm a better. I'll be honest. I'm a better talker than the last president, the new president, the other person who ran for president. I'm better than all of them at talking.
That's true.
I'm not better than Barack Obama. That guy was probably the best ever.
That guy could talk his way out of a wet paper bag.
That guy could talk his way into a genocide. Terrible. Cut that.
Maybe we'll leave that one in.
I mean, it's true. He did.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Guy talked his way through a hit list.
Yeah.
The first episode of this show that we ever did, remember what Derek said about talking?
No.
He said communication is a real skill. It's like a dying art. And if you can communicate with people and look them in the eyes and have a conversation with them, like that's a real skill going forward, because everybody's texting and doing all of that. And I really do believe that. One of the best things that came out of my 20s was when I first went to broadcasting school, I was petrified. I didn't know it till I got to broadcasting school. I was petrified to public speak or talk into a microphone. And when I was there, one of my teachers goes, why don't you go to Toastmasters?
Okay.
And I was like, well, like, what's that? And he told me to go, and I signed up, and I was like, well, this seems like a waste of money. And then I went and did it, and I learned to public speak. And I said to you this morning, like, everybody's got one talent that they're really good at. And I think mine is actually public speaking, my ability to talk to, I mean, it's literally one of my jobs is to talk to a room full of people.
Yeah.
And I have zero anxiety doing it. Doesn't matter if it's 5 people. I mean, I've talked to crowds of 500 people and I have no anxiety about it.
Yeah.
At all. And that's crazy. Like that is one thing I got out of my 20s out of going to broadcasting school. So
Yeah. So maybe that's always stuck with you, and that's how you got to where you are now.
yeah.
Right.
I don't look back on my 20s and be like, oh, boo-hoo me, like things went wrong. So much went wrong in my 20s. And I did sort of pile on the trauma in my 20s, like all these things that happened. And I just sort of buried them all down deep.
Yeah.
And they didn't really come out until my 30s, I would say. Like, I mean, some of them I dealt with, but a lot of it I just sort of buried.
Yeah.
Because that's what I was taught to do, is just, it's the line from Talladega Nights where Will Ferrell's like, just bury it down deep and don't ever bring it up again. Yeah, that was me.
Yeah.
That's what I was taught. I think you were probably somewhat similar.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I'd bury some things in my childhood for sure.
yeah, and now that I'm in my 30s, I'm starting to realize like there are parts of that do come up and create these things you have to address, and maybe like mental health challenges. And now I'm speaking more like not just from my own experience, but like more abstract. One of the things I think that our generation really experienced in our 20s was what I just said, like the trauma. Maybe a lot of us probably had trauma as teenagers and before. I know I did. And just stuffed them away and never dealt with them. And now we're in our late 30s and some of us are getting into our 40s. And it's really rearing its head for a lot of people I know. That's probably if I had to say like what's your biggest regret of your 20s, it's like not addressing the things that happened to me and not like getting over them or through them or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just stuffing it away and forgetting about it. That'd be my biggest regret from my 20s, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I know in my 20s, like I didn't have much regard for myself.
Yeah, that's fair.
No
one else had it for you either.
Because I didn't.
Sure, yeah, fair enough.
Like, honestly, I didn't care what happened to me in my 20s.
Yeah.
So
that is such a
thanks
male
for
thing.
ruining that moment, by the way.
Sorry, go ahead. You say it again for you.
Like, I really didn't care what happened, especially in my early 20s. I did not care what happened to me. You know, I was abusing, like, drugs, alcohol, all kinds of stuff in my 20s because I just didn't care about the consequences or where I ended up.
Yeah, I did the same. Do you ever have a moment in your 20s where you're like, somebody says to you, like, what are you going to do in your 40s? Or like, you know, you'll have a different mindset in your 40s. You're like, oh, I'm not living in my 40s.
Yeah.
I used to have that
I assumed
too.
I wouldn't be here.
I assumed I wouldn't be here either. I don't know what I thought would get me, but I just always assumed I wouldn't be. I mean, I'm still not 40 yet, so, you know,
Yeah.
not there yet. But that was a belief that I had. And I know we have friends that thought that way too. Well, they're still here. But
Yeah.
I've kind of, the whole like mental health thing is, I've said it to you so many times. I think we need to do several episodes on mental health and, you know, from our own point of view, the struggles we've had, but just some of the people we know who are willing to talk about their struggles.
Yeah.
We've mentioned on the show, like the mental health struggles of like both men and women, but like men in particular, it's gotten real ugly for men our age, like the 35 to, I guess, 50 range.
Yeah.
60, some cases.
Well, I know I went through it. Like, well, I've talked about that many times, but you know, I was around 36 when I really went through it. Mm-hmm. I think I went through it many times, but like, especially in my early 20s. But then there was definitely like everything had piled up by the time I was in my mid 30s because I hadn't dealt with any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. In your 20s.
In my 20s, like stuff from my childhood, stuff from my teenage years, 20s. It all just piled up, and then eventually it hits you like mid 30s. Like, super important to deal with it.
Oh yeah.
Super important to talk about it. And,
Yeah.
you know, luckily, I was able to do that and kind of came out on the other side okay.
Me too.
But yeah, I think a lot of people don't.
No.
So
No. And I mean, in the past, I'd say over the past 2 years, I know of probably, I mean, it's getting close to 10. If I go back 5 years, there's probably at least a dozen men I know who have committed suicide or had a drug overdose.
yeah,
It's probably close to 12 over the last 5 years. And that's just people that I've kept in contact with, or like I know their whereabouts. Like, who knows beyond that?
well, a lot of that probably does come with the idea of regret in your 20s. Like I think both of us have come to terms with, we certainly fucked up.
Yeah.
Or it seems that way, or like we were led the wrong way, or whatever it may be. But we use that now as like a motivator.
Yeah, fuel.
It's like fuel.
Post-traumatic growth.
That's right.
That's where, I don't know if that phrase is coined, but shotgun if it's not. Trademark.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's, man, I don't regret my 20s at all. Everything that happened for a reason. It led me to this point in my life, and I'm at a great point in my life right now. Both, like, I'm not exactly where I want to be professionally, but personally, I couldn't ask for anything more.
Yeah.
Professionally, I feel like I'm on the rise.
Yeah.
And if you look at traditional metrics, I'm doing very well. Like, if people looked at, and you are too, if you look at like the tradition, people look at like work-life balance and money and like prestige. So like, do you have a prestigious title? Do you make good money? Do you have a good work-life balance? I have all of those things, but I'm still like hungry for more. And I think so much of that comes from my 20s. The fact that like I feel as though I wasted money and time in my 20s, and I can never get that back, but I can choose to not waste everything from, this point forward.
Yeah, I think a lot of what I went through in my 20s was learning for now, right? Smart people that have never gone through hardships become dumb people when the hardships come around. Right? So I feel like those hardships that I did go through prepared me for what I'm doing now. And I know now I have the ability, because of those things, to persevere and do well.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. The last 5 years have been a good example of that. For real.
Meaning what?
Well, like, in the last 5 years, most people have probably experienced the hardest hardships of their life. And for a lot of people, they probably never experienced a true, like, I'm sure they experienced some, but probably not to the degree that the last 5 years has brought, with like, obviously everything during the pandemic and the financial aspects that, like the repercussions of all that have come out now in the last few years with the cost of life and the amount of debt people are in. Like, now they're experiencing those hardships, and I don't think a lot of people are equipped for that kind of thing.
No.
We're not taught financial literacy or, any of that stuff, budgeting.
Right.
Not to a meaningful degree.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're saying rings true.
Do you feel like you wasted your 20s?
No. I mean, if you looked at pockets, I'd say yes. So if you went like 20 to 22, it'd be like, yeah, that was when I knew you and I was in film school. Big waste of time. No, but like, if I did actually look at pockets, I'd be like, yeah, those, that little period was probably a waste. But the whole scope of my 20s, I learned what I didn't want in my life, and I learned what I did. And, I was somebody who didn't want kids from when I was a kid until basically till I met my wife.
Yeah.
And then meeting her, I was like, I wanted a family with her.
Yeah.
And it took me, going through a lot of hardship in my 20s. And then I think it made me, like, I have a level of resilience now that wouldn't exist if I didn't go through my 20s. The struggles, like having a hard time paying bills, jobs, being massively in debt from school, going through different traumas, losing my father at 25. Like, I lost a lot of people when I was in my 20s. and it was horrible. But all of those events, as terrible as they were, led me to ultimately become a better version of myself. And yeah, so in the last episode with Steve, we were talking about like becoming the best version of myself. And I don't know, this is a question I ask myself all the time, but I don't know if you get to the best version of yourself without seeing the worst version of yourself. Or getting close. We didn't really talk to Steve about that, but that's something that I've really been thinking about. It's like, it's almost like the whole thing with like circling the drain or like bottom of the barrel, all those cliches of like, you got to go get to the bottom, rock bottom, whatever. I got close to the bottom and saw that version of myself, and I'm like, ugh, like, no, I want to be whatever the opposite of that is. That's where I want to be.
Yeah.
And now that I've seen that version of myself, I'm like, I'm never going back to that.
Right.
And that version of me was like much of my 20s, probably like a good portion of my 20s. And
yeah,
I don't ever want to go back to that. So it really motivates me, everything that happened in my 20s. Even just being broke all the time, like that feeling of not being able to pay your bills, like I'm not going back to that.
Yeah.
Like I bust my ass so that I don't ever get back there. And a lot of people don't understand it, like the amount that I do work. People are like, how do you do it? I'm like, well, I'm never going back. I'm like De Niro at the end of Heat. I ain't ever going back to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Like, when you go through those things, like you in Vancouver, myself, like I was super poor in school. Like I've had points where I don't know how I'm going to pay the rent, right? But to make it happen, like I made it happen back then. Didn't know how I was going to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I look at that too, and I'm like, I never want to go through that feeling again.
Resiliency is a really underrated thing. Like if you have, if you are resilient and you have that tool in your toolbox, I mean, there's not a lot that, like, you just become, Aaron called it like superhuman in the episode we did with him. You really do start to feel superhuman when you build up that resiliency muscle inside of you. But the problem with that muscle is that you have to go through a lot of shit.
Yeah.
To get it. It's not something that you can get while having a good time, like having a great time. You're not at a bar and you're like, damn, I'm getting super resilient here.
This drink's making me resilient.
This rum and Coke has got me feeling extra resilient. Yeah. No.
Might make you feel bulletproof.
Yeah, you might get into a fight and get the shit kicked out of you, which might have happened a time or two.
Yeah. Courage. Liquid courage.
Liquid courage, yeah. Not liquid resiliency, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, my main takeaway, I think, looking back on my 20s is that really hard time for most of it, but all of those struggles forged me into the person that I am now. And, my wife makes the comment all the time, she made it to you yesterday, that I am not the same person I was even 2 years ago. Yeah. Like, I'm a very changed person. And I'm excited where I can get to in the next couple of years, like just continue on the path I'm on, having a real focus on being the best version of myself for myself, but also for my wife and kids and my colleagues and my friends. And it's exciting. Like I'm really happy to have been so unhappy through my 20s.
I'm really happy how terrible my 20s were.
Yeah. You know what? That's a message I do pass to my students, is that like your 20s is probably going to be the most exciting time of your life, but it's probably going to be some really shitty, lean years in there. And you just have to know that going through those struggles, there's something better for you on the other side. You just have to continue to work and, put the effort in and just show up.
Yeah. Well, and you can either work hard through your 20s and then coast through your 30s, or you can coast through your 20s and then work extra hard through your 30s.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Extra hard.
We are working, you're working in your 40s, but I'm working harder in my 30s than I've ever worked in my entire life. And I still did work hard in my 30s, though. You did, yeah. The back half, just like me.
Yeah.
36 and on.
Yeah.
Yeah. That part's kind of shitty. Like, if I was to look back, I'd be like, man, I wish I worked harder in my 20s. But I learned a lot of lessons out of not working as hard as I should have. A lot of doors never opened that I probably could have pushed open.
Yeah.
And it was just because I got to the door, I'm like, ooh, it's heavy. I'll just go someplace else.
I'll hopefully find another way in, an open window or something.
Yeah. An open window, yeah. Maybe I'll find a place without a door and I'll go to that place.
There's some kind of light screen door here somewhere.
Yeah. I can remember going to a bar in Vancouver that people had said was like this amazing bar. And it was like down this alley that was kind of dark. And I'm like, this looks scary. I never went to it. And I remember running into people like a day or two later. And they're like, bro, that was an amazing night. Were you there? I'm like, no, it looks scary. I'm like, I didn't go. Yeah. I'm like, damn, I should have went. But yeah, that was just me. You know, I was very fearful of everything. And I never tried anything, even that. I mean, that's a terrible example because I probably saved money by not going, but might have missed a good time.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of lessons you can learn from your 20s that I think we can impart on people like our students and maybe somebody who watches this show who's in their 20s. I know there's a few of them who have said that they enjoy it. So it was a pleasure to have you. Now get the fuck out of my house. That goes for you too. Get out of here.